Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Hope the weekend has gone well. Let me start with an Al Jazeera Inside Story hosted by Martine Dennis. Will Africa's historic free trade agreement succeed? Some very interesting guests besides myself: Stephen Yaboa, the co-founder of Commodity Monitor, and Olusegun Okubanjo, the founder and managing partner of finance firm Obsidian. Have a listen. It was quite a lively debate. My article over the weekend is about the petrodollar, and the Saudi threat to ditch the dollar is the granddaddy of all geopolitical red lines. Last week, Reuters reported Saudi Arabia threatens to ditch dollar oil trades to stop OPEC. The Saudis know they have the dollar as the nuclear option, one of the sources familiar with the matter said. The Saudis say let the Americans pass OPEC and it would be the US economy that would fall apart, another source said. OPEC, or the No Oil Producing and Exporting Cartels Act, was first introduced in the year 2000 and aims to remove sovereign immunity from US antitrust law, paving the way for OPEC states to be sued for curbing output in a bid to raise oil prices. OPEC has always behaved like a cartel in that sense. In 21st century geopolitics, this is the granddaddy of all geopolitical red lines, and allow me to explain why. The petrodollar economy was symbolically born on February the 14th, 1945, when King Abdulaziz ibn Saud of Saudi Arabia met with Franklin D. Roosevelt aboard the USS Quincy in Great Bitter Lake, Egypt. The Saudi kingdom would sell its oil for US dollars, recycle surpluses into US treasuries. The kingdom has nearly $1 trillion invested in the United States and holds $160 billion in US treasuries. And the US would lend its legitimacy and protection to the kingdom. Dr. Zbigniew Brzezinski said this: the three grand imperatives of imperial geostrategy are to prevent collusion and maintain security dependence among the vassals, to keep tributaries pliant and protected, and to keep the barbarians from coming together. Saudi Arabia falls in the vassal category in Brzezinski's description. There is plenty of propaganda in the 21st century discourse around oil and resource wars, but let's do the math. Depending on prices, oil is estimated to represent 2 to 3% of global gross domestic product. At the current price of $70 per barrel, the annual value of global oil output is $2.5 trillion. Trading in derivatives such as oil futures and options is mainly dollar denominated. The top two global energy exchanges, ICE and CME, traded 1 billion lots of oil derivatives in 2018 with a nominal value of about $5 trillion. The 21st century oil economy is a very big deal, and Richard Kapuscinski wrote as follows about the oil and petrodollar economy in The Shah of Shahs. Oil creates the illusion of a completely changed life, life without work, life for free. Oil is a resource that anesthetizes thought, blurs vision, corrupts. Oil kindles extraordinary emotions and hopes, since oil is above all a great temptation. It is the temptation of ease, wealth, strength, fortune, power. It is a filthy, foul-smelling liquid that squirts obligingly up into the air and falls back to earth as a rustling shower of money. Therefore, in many respects, whomsoever controls this spigot, because this is real cash, can control the world. Therefore, one must also accept that access to oil defined 20th century empires, and the petrodollar agreement was the key to the ascendancy of the United States as the world's sole superpower. The United States dollar remains de facto the world's currency. Accordingly, almost all oil sales throughout the world are dominated in US dollars. Because most countries rely on oil imports, they are forced to maintain large stockpiles of dollars in order to continue imports. This creates a consistent demand for dollars. America's war machine runs on, is funded by, and exists in protection of oil. Threats by any nation to undermine the petrodollar system are viewed by Washington as tantamount to a declaration of war against the United States of America. There has existed no greater geopolitical red line in the American century. It is typically a very bad idea to pronounce the ditching of the petrodollar in public. And to have your vassal state do it in public speaks to a level of dissonance and mind-boggling arrogance at the heart of the Saudi court, which I will return to momentarily. Sure, Muammar was a dictator, as was Saddam, but the proximate cause for their red in tooth and claw deletions were their public pronouncements around ditching the dollar. Gaddafi had a plan to quit selling Libyan oil in US dollars and wanted payment instead in gold-backed dinars. Saddam wanted to be paid in euros. In a March 22, 2018 article in The Intercept, MBS bragged to the Emirati Crown Prince and others that Kushner was in his pocket. The Crown Prince's antennae are evidently completely scrambled. Jared Kushner is no protection against the petrodollar deep state. The petrodollar deep state is currently engaged with bringing the Chavismo revolution, which was after all a revolution in its Monroe Doctrine backyard, to heel. But make no mistake, that declaration of war by a 34-year-old Saudi Crown Prince will have been heard real loud and real clear. Therefore, he should not ask for whom the bell tolls. It is the bell he chose to ring. This is a photograph of Zbigniew Brzezinski when he was in Afghanistan. This is a link to the article in The Intercept about Kushner being in his back pocket. Really interesting article in Reuters about rage within the machine. Brexit headline, Blizzard overloads FX algos, machine-driven trading systems in the $5.1 trillion a day global currency market are struggling to cope with the blizzard of headlines about Britain's efforts to extricate itself from the European Union, making it more expensive and risky to bet for or against sterling. As a divided government battles a divided parliament over a way forward, the chorus of characters who can now influence events has grown, flummoxing news reading algorithms or algos, which are designed to pass phrases from recognized speakers before executing a trade. Brexit headlines have thrown a spanner in their works for the sheer number of characters moving the currency on a daily basis. News reading algos are a growing part of a wider revolution on the trading floor of banks and asset managers, where machines have supplanted swathes of human traders, slashing costs and boosting the speed at which deals are done, sometimes down to millionths of a second. The problem for the computers is that Brexit is producing too many headlines for them to process, Reuters, for instance, has published up to 400 news headlines on Brexit per day in recent weeks, up from around 15 on British politics before it became an issue. Bloomberg has also pumped up the volume of Brexit content by 4 times since last autumn, running more than 1,000 headlines some days. Obscure parliamentary procedures are now at the centre of policy making, and people who typically would not feature in a computer trading model are suddenly taking centre stage. So sensitive is the currency to developments that even a hand signal can affect the price. Market makers who provide liquidity by offering to buy and sell currencies on their account also use algorithms to set bids and offers, but confusion around Brexit has made that more difficult too. Daily cash volumes for sterling were around $65 billion in February, around 35% less than $100 billion worth traded before the Brexit referendum. And this goes back to something I wrote called Currency Puzzles, and I was saying that they are the most liquid market of all in the world, and something equivalent to the Challenger deep in the Mariana Trench. And I was quoting that number of 5.1 trillion a day, and I said, within the 24-hour news cycle, liquidity peaks and troughs, and we've witnessed spectacular and exponential moves typically in the early hours, when most of the world is in the land of nod and liquidity at its lowest. It's then that wizards and gremlins stalk the night. And saying once upon a time FX was a voiceover market, but today it's entirely screen-based and algorithmic, and high-frequency trading is a big component. And I've said previously that the petrodollar underpins US power, and it's an observable fact. Speaking about the speed in the FX markets, Paul Virilio says wealth is the hidden side of speed, and speed the hidden side of wealth. Speed now illuminates reality, whereas light once gave objects of the world their shape. He calls this philosophy dromology, which he defines as the science or logic of speed. Speed at which something happens may change its essential nature, and that which moves with speed quickly comes to dominate that which is slower. Whoever controls the territory possesses it. Possession of territory is not primarily about laws and contracts, but first and foremost a matter of movement and circulation.